announced, like literally less than an hour ago, but I've actually been using it properly since mid-January. I've taken it on a racetrack, through a snowstorm, and quite literally across the world. And yeah, we're getting married next year. No, I took it too far. But yeah, this has been a really interesting case study for just how fast mid-range phones have improved over the last few years. So now that I can finally talk about this, I feel like a weight has been lifted. Let's do this. For anyone wondering, this is what was sent to me. A big cardboard box, inside of which, two things. First of all, the Oppo Enco Free earbuds, which I've also been testing alongside the phone, and the device itself. This is the Reno 3 Pro, but a different Reno 3 Pro to the one you might have heard of. That'll make more sense in a minute. It's nice presentation. I appreciate the extra effort versus just having a plain black box, but of course more important is what's inside. So there's a sleeve with instruction manuals and a clear TPU case, standard stuff, but it is good to see a fast 30-watt charger, and not just a USB-C cable, but a pair of actually decent quality earphones. Now, you might have already heard this name before, Reno 3 Pro, and that's because Oppo released a Reno 3 Pro in China December last year, but this phone is the international version of the Reno 3 Pro, and it's actually a completely different device. With that out of the way then, there's a lot to talk about here, but I'd be lying if I said the focus was anything but the 6 cameras dotted around the phone. They're not what I expected, but I'll come to this. The Reno 3 Pro is priced at around $430, so with that in mind, my first impression was that it feels okay. I'm a fan of the auroral blue colouring on the back, and the Reno is yet another reminder that every time I think I've seen every possible way to do a smartphone gradient finish, I'm wrong. With the Reno 3 Pro, the light rays actually start from the bottom right corner and kind of shoot outwards. I would have personally preferred a glass finish, but the silver lining to these plastic materials is that the phone is featherweight, considering that it has a 4025 mAh battery in it, and let's talk about that for a second. As I mentioned, I've taken this phone everywhere for 2 months, and in that time, it hasn't died on me once. The phone takes about 20 minutes to charge 50%, or just over 50 minutes to charge 100, which is good, but the battery life has been amazing, and in my travels with it, a couple of other things have been clear. I like the display. I've watched entire seasons of Netflix shows on it, and with a 1080 by 2400 resolution, spread across a 6.4-inch screen size, it's relatively crisp, with discoloration only at extreme angles. The highlight is the Super AMOLED tech, and assisted by a piece of Oppo's own software, the colors, even in third-party apps, are given an extra pop. It is a little strange though, that this pop doesn't translate to the phone's user interface, and that's because the company has made the purposeful decision to tone down the saturation of their icons and wallpapers, as that supposedly reduces eye fatigue. It's actually the opposite direction to Samsung, who've just dialed up the saturation of their icons, but I don't know, each to their own. I mean, what would you prefer? Just for a bit of fun really, I pulled out the Oppo R11, an upper mid-range phone from about 2.5 years ago, and it's kind of astronomical, the jump that's been made, in this segment in particular. You'll also notice the dual punch-hole cameras, previously seen on the likes of the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, and I've said this before for the hole punch, I'm personally a fan. Like, every time I looked at this phone from the front, I've had that subtle reassurance that I am actually looking at a modern, sophisticated piece of technology. In my eyes, it is so much better than a notch. The other thing I noticed while watching the shows on the Reno was this little bar on the side. You can turn it off if you don't like it, but the more I started using it, the more I found it to be weirdly exciting. As of now, it only supports a few applications, but it feels like a taste of how smartphone multitasking should be. You can reply to a message without leaving a full-screen video, or browse the files on your phone and even play your own. If you drag an app from this bar, it'll automatically open up in split screen view. On that note though, ColorOS 7, the software skin Oppo puts on top of Android 10 here, has actually been a really nice surprise. The raise to wake feature works quickly, which when combined with face unlocking means that getting into your phone is effortless. There are visual flourishes throughout, like the fancy power off screen or scrolling indicators that react to velocity, and a massive selection of live wallpapers that contextually respond to scrolling. What I wasn't expecting is the vast control it gives you over icons, customization that literally rivals third-party launchers, which, when you think about it, it kinda makes sense. Oppo would rather you stick to their launcher than switch to a third-party one. But at the same time, it's rare for customization like this to be pre-baked into a phone. Also, the dark mode here is one of the best. When you turn it on, it covers the 200 most used apps, everything from the Play Store to YouTube to the File Manager to Instagram, and saves more battery. Now, just before I get to the cameras, worth noting is performance, because we're quite used to seeing Qualcomm-powered mid-range phones, but Oppo have gone with MediaTek instead, with, I guess, the silver lining being that this is world's first smartphone to use their Helio P95 chip. It basically takes the Helio P90 that you might have seen last year, and then it bumps up the GPU, AI, and the connectivity. It's not a game-changing improvement, more of a case of keeping up with the times, and they've paired that with 8 gigs of RAM and a pretty generous 256 gigabytes of storage. I found that 2D and 2.5D games, they were a non-issue, but it's good to see that even Call of Duty Mobile was fine on high settings. There were a couple of even heavier games I tried, ones that might not have been as well optimized, and for them frame rate was lower. Still playable, but not 60 frames per second smooth. Oh yeah, there's Dolby Atmos sound here as well. It is rich, it is loud, but the fact that it is coming from only a single speaker does limit the spatial effect. Anyways, let's address the elephant in the room, cameras. So you might remember back in January, I teased this on Twitter, world's first phone with a 44 megapixel punch hole camera. Well, in case the penny hasn't dropped yet, this is that. It's got quite a crisp output, churning out full 44 megapixel selfies, but like, it's a selfie. You're probably not going to be printing it out on A2 paper and hanging it on your wall. Probably. So, resolution is less important than the actual quality of the image, as well as the camera modes. So, it was good to see that portrait mode works well, with good edge detection thanks to that second depth sensing camera, and you can take night mode selfies, which you can probably imagine I got very excited about. And it really works. Like, the difference between a normal non-night mode shot in the dark and a night mode shot in the dark should give you an idea of just how powerful smartphone imaging software has become. And this becomes even more impressive as we move to the rear cameras. The night mode on the Reno 3 Pro frankly shocked me. For starters, there's the normal night mode, which captures for around 4 seconds and significantly brightens up a nightscape. But something I haven't seen on a mid-range smartphone before is tripod mode. That lets you plant your phone down on a tripod, or really just rest it against something stable, and it'll spend 30 seconds literally turning night into day. Seeing this phone in action gave me the exact same goosebumps feeling that I had when taking a look at $1,000 flagships last year. It also has ultra dark mode, which uses all manner of software magic to create bright photos, even standing in just one lux of light, almost pitch black. The photos just generally have been really good. They'll come out as 16 megapixels by default, but here's where it gets interesting. If you tap on the settings menu, you can switch up to capturing full 64 megapixel shots. But then, if you go into the Pro mode of the camera, you can turn on Ultra HD, which shoots a 108 megapixel photo. It's using a technology called subpixel interpolation. It's effectively estimating extra pixels. It's an interesting concept, but in my testing you actually get the best results from 64 megapixels as you move between them. So this is me bit by bit zooming through the entire focal range, and you almost don't realize it's changing lenses, and you can still snap a good photo at 5x zoom. The video quality is okay. It's about what you'd expect, which is to say, if you use it well, the ceiling for what you can get is high. What I did think was cool though is that when you head into video, you get an ultra steady mode, and to dial it up even more, Ultra Steady Pro, which uses the wider angle camera. I mentioned that I took this phone to a racetrack. Well, a big part of why is to use this ultra steady feature. Considering there's no actual optical image stabilization, it's impressive what they've done with software alone. And finally, the phone's got an optical in-display fingerprint scanner. It's got a monster of a SIM tray, supporting 2 SIMs, plus a microSD card, and it's got a headphone jack. So yeah, that's the Reno 3 Pro, International Edition. this has been fun. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you in the Pro Max, the absolute best devices that both companies offer. However, they're both massive and incredibly expensive, so almost a more important comparison is how good their mainstream flagships are. So welcome to Galaxy S20 versus iPhone 11, and the conclusion here is not one I expected to make. To hold, the new Galaxy S20 feels a lot like any other Samsung flagship. It's mostly glass with a curved back and a slightly narrower body than we're used to, so it's actually relatively compact feeling in the hand. I will say this though, it is in stark contrast with the way the iPhone feels. Apart from height, that phone is bulkier in every dimension. It is thicker, it is wider, and far heavier. We're talking 194 grams, which makes the 163 gram S20 feel featherweight. Both phones are well constructed. The casings are sturdy, with Gorilla Glass on the front and the back, but I'm just not a fan of the way either looks. They don't look like they mean business, as much as their higher-end siblings do. Samsung's S20 is visually a little bland in my eyes, and on first glance looks almost identical to the company's own mid-range phones, like the Galaxy A51 and A71. We're talking $400 devices here. And then as for the iPhone 11, it loses that slick matte finish that I love about the iPhone 11 Pro. And I never quite got used to how it has a square camera module, but cameras that don't actually fill it. Both have IP68 water and dust resistance ratings, and neither has a headphone jack. So, on balance, in terms of design and materials, I'm halfway down the middle. Neither is offensive looking, but neither is the prettiest bit of tech I've seen either. By the way, I've just launched a pretty massive giveaway of one Galaxy S20 Ultra and 4 Galaxy S20s. It is free and international, and all rules are in the description. Turning both devices over, the narrative changes. I don't think I've ever seen this much of a one-sided battle between two similarly priced devices. The S20's display is so far ahead of the iPhone 11s that it feels like these two devices are from different decades, which I guess they kind of are. For starters, the Galaxy S20s is larger and brighter. With a consistent brightness level of close to 800 nits, there will be times when this phone is clearly visible, but when the iPhone, at around 625-ish, is actually difficult to read. Plus, the fact that it uses OLED technology compared to LCD is a Quad HD Plus panel, whereas this is actually below 1080p. That gives the Samsung over 3 times the number of pixels. Let that sink in. To Apple's credit, that doesn't make Samsung's screen 3 times better, and the iPhone 11 is still reasonably crisp, but there's no shaking the sheer size of that gap. And to add insult to injury, the Galaxy S20 uses the same 120Hz refresh rate that we saw on the Ultra. That is twice the refresh rate of the iPhone, and twice the touch response rate.